Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Backer and welcome to Off the Wall Novels. Pringle, my parakeet, will not be joining me today because he was being uncooperative, but today we are going to talk about a book that I think is just perfect for this channel given all of the different things that I discuss about words and concepts and philosophy, specifically postmodern philosophy. But that book is America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, a Diagnostic by Phillip Freedenberg, illustrated by Jeff Walton. And I'll show some of those illustrations a little bit further along into the video. I was also really happy to see that in the edition I got, because I pre-ordered it, there were all of these stickers and different assets that came with the book, and that is just really fun for like an unpackaging experience. These are little artifacts that I'll be able to keep and show off to other people when this thing blows up. I also wanted to mention that on August 15th, I'm going to be releasing a novel called Lionel Lancet and the Right Vibe. And so if you want any updates on that, you can follow me on Instagram at DanielBackerAuthor, or you can join my mailing list at danielbacker.com. Before I dive into this, I just want to lay a little bit of groundwork if you haven't been on this channel before, or if you're not completely familiar with postmodern philosophy. So the broad strokes of postmodern philosophy, essentially, there's always something absent when you try to define something, because words just cannot perfectly do justice to the thing that they're trying to define. Other ideas in this regard include Wittgenstein's idea that the world is all that the case is. So when we refer to the world, really what we're talking about is just a linguistic construction of the world. That we can't really know the world in itself, we can only know an account of the world, or a narrative of the world, and everything we know about the world will be contingent on that narrative. This can be a bleak outlook on life. This can be something that is depressing because you want to know, you want to have certainty, but at the end of the day, you just have imperfect words. And so if postmodernism is all about deconstructing concepts and words and ways of looking at the world, postmodernism might be taking those deconstructed words and then building something more assertive out of them. This, I would argue, is what America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots does. This is probably the most metafictional novel I've ever read in my entire life. And so the actual narrative action of the book involves the author describing the intentions that he has for the book within the book. He wants to restore the value and meaning of words as an actual universe that you can enter into. Let the great unraveling of the meta paradigm begin, as it has always been beginning, both for today as well as for tomorrow, as inscribed in the minds of the people who wear the entire history of the Akashic records over their eyes, like mescaline-soaked bandanas, to obscure the pure and brilliant blur of American squalor as it conforms to the horror of these inescapable and newly manufactured, hollowed-out cardboard horizons. Old cactus boots under a bus make magic clouds that rain down on the graves of old finger foods. It's a really fitting image for epistemology, having a lens over your eyes, because it shows how the rules of your epistemology ends up influencing the way that you perceive the world. And in this case, it's wearing the entire history of the Akashic records over eyes, like mescaline-soaked bandanas. And so if that doesn't make you want to read this book, I don't know what to tell you. All of this is very meaningful, very momentous, and very in your face. And this is something that I always think is the golden egg in terms of writing philosophical fiction. You want to make it matter. So restoring the meaning of words isn't just a trifle of metafiction. He's using it actually as a subversive force in order to counteract this authoritarian government that is trying to remove the meaning from words. And they're trying to shut down thought, they're closing bookstores, there's surveillance of people's minds, there are civil wars in the streets. Phillip Freedenberg in this book uses the assertive quality of words as these elevated, mystical opportunities for us to join into a community through reading the book itself. That's another cool quality about the book, is that it gives you the feeling as a reader that by reading it, you're committing a subversive act against the authoritarian government, and also using the words in order to travel into the unified field. So Phillip Freedenberg writes about the words in his novel, but then also words in general, almost like an ether that you can use to scale toward a specific destination. And part of the narrative action of this book are actually the characters, Phillip Freedenberg and Jeff Walton, the author and illustrator respectively, going on a journey using words in order to travel So even though America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, a Diagnostic, is responding to postmodernism and trying to push it further, it's still very reminiscent of a lot of postmodern authors that if you like, I'm sure you will enjoy this book. So a lot of the historical digressions and esoteric references remind me a lot of Thomas Pynchon and will resonate with you if you enjoy things like, the mention of the Peter Penguin Society in The Crying of Lot 49. And a lot of the absurd humor and imagery in the book reminds me of Aunt Kind and Charlie Kaufman's sense of humor, where things are so absurd and specific. So, for example, in America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, a Diagnostic, there are twin Steven Seagals riding elephants through the book that are stalking Phillip Freedenberg and Jeff Walton. And at one point, they decide that they should make like an elephant parking zone so that Steven Seagal and his double riding the elephants will know to park their elephants there. It's completely absurd. In addition to both of those postmodern authors, a lot of the sprawling sentences and references to the narcotizing effects of entertainment and technology are very reminiscent of David Foster Wallace and Infinite Jest. A lot of this reminds me too of the entertainment in Infinite Jest, because the entertainment is this film that's so engrossing it basically makes you lose your consciousness and you go comatose after watching it. And that's very similar to Phillip Freedenberg's idea of neuroform and total consciousness replacement with these screen sync. I pictured them as VR headsets. I might be a little bit wrong on the details there. It basically is this aspect of the totalitarian government where they entertain you so much and they flood your brain with dopamine and it ends up replacing your consciousness, and they take the consciousness that it sucks out of you and they put it into a cow. But then also the layout of the book is very playful. A lot of the word the, are encouched in these parentheses, and that's not really explained until later in the book, where we learn that the characters are actually using the word the as a portal to travel back in time in the book. It's just an interesting formal reminder that the words that you're reading are more than just words on the page. These are alive, and they are part of this metaphysics and this ether that allow characters and consciousnesses to travel. So I'll confess, it isn't always easy to keep track of the esoteric histories that he mentions and the different subversive factions throughout history that are trying to respond to these elite government figures who are trying to suppress them. But I think all of that amounts to what maximalism does at its best, which is confronting you with something that's bigger than yourself. But the central thrust of the story and the theme of using words as an opportunity in order to build something assertive rings loud and clear. I would also say that in some ways this could be called like post-metafiction, because in a lot of ways there are moments in the book that seem non-referential, that he's just using words to talk about words in general, and any element of a scene or metaphysics that we can engage with just completely disappears. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like it. We get this idea of just words in and of themselves. The effect of this is far more than just navel-gazing. It reminds me of something that I saw described in a TED Talk about Philip K. Dick's intentions in his exegesis. He was trying to exhaust the quality of words that signifies things in order to peer beyond their constructive quality to get at the ineffable unified field that exists behind them. And that's something that I think that this book does intentionally as well. For example, there are moments when the author experiences word fever, and there are these long passages of these words that seem to be chosen at random, or the imagery is incoherent intentionally, and you're reading it and you're not necessarily piecing a scene together in your head. We are shown just words as empty placeholders that don't refer to anything, that we can use to almost distract our egoic mind that makes sense of the world in order to let the ineffable quality within us emerge. The book is a raw type of hallucinatory word drug that the reader and cult member take to ascend into the unified field, or what we are calling the new America. But they have to read the text deeply and free their minds to the word fever to enter the new vibratory gateway. I explained as best I felt I understood it to Jeff regarding not only what the function of the book was for the reader, but also what the central meaning of the Cult of the Cactus Boots had now become for the author of the book. So one of the things that I think holds the book together structurally is that a lot of things are introduced with no explanation and then we get an explanation pages later. After we sort of learn the way that he keeps us turning the pages by suspending the information and then eventually delivering on it, we end up expecting we're going to get some sort of closure at the end. So for example, there are various moments throughout the book where it says static interruption, and that isn't really explained in the first half, but then he begins to show some ambiguity of the metaphysics of the book, and I think that this is the way that the book concludes. So if you don't want any spoilers, I would turn off the video right now. If you're still watching, let's go ahead. I didn't understand what this static interruption thing was about, but then I would say about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the book, he begins to suggest that maybe everything that you're reading is happening in one of those screen sync VR headsets that is replacing your consciousness so that it can be sent to a cow. And this was something that I found a little bit confusing at first, because I was like, wait a minute, I thought this was all supposed to be about the liberatory power of words and how we're escaping this. So it would seem if at the end everything was revealed to be contingent on the screen sync headset that the author is wearing, then the authoritarian government wins. And I didn't like that, but I think he's actually doing something more complex and more optimistic with this. So this makes everything, I think, even more revolutionary and more subversive against this authoritarian government, that in spite of this consciousness replacement and this dopamine surge that's being put into the author's head, they still manage to escape. They still manage to assert the power of words and use that metaphysics in order to enter the unified field. So that's all that I have time for today. I wasn't even able to scratch the surface of this book. There are so many more things going on in it, but I tried to give it some sense of totality to hopefully either analyze it for you if you've already read it, or to convince you to read it if you've not read it yet. So thank you for watching. This has been Off the Wall Novels. I am Daniel Backer. You have a good day.